Hi everyone, Aiden here at the etrailer. Today we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install the Sumo Springs Solo Custom Helper Springs for the rear axle on our 2020 Ford F-150. So right now we've got no tongue weight on the truck. The trailer is unhooked. We're in position ready to go, but I want to see, with no weight on the truck, where's our stock ride height? And to do that, I want to take ourselves over to the wheel well and take a measurement from the ground to the top inside edge of that wheel well. And for us today, that measurement's gonna be sitting right at 40 inches. So now we're gonna hook up the trailer, see how much that brings the back end of the F-150 down. This is rated to pull this camper just fine, but with stock suspension, I do expect to see a fair bit of drop. Now, as I'm dropping this camper down onto the ball, I can see the truck dropping down a little bit here, and we have a GoPro rolling underneath, so we can actually see what's happening to that factory bump stop and see how much it's dropping down and what kind of gap is left before any support is engaged. So right now, the jack is lifted up, the trailer is fully on the truck. Let's actually take this a step further and get a measurement to see how it compares. So going to the same spot in the wheel well here, from the ground to the top inside edge, we're gonna be sitting at 38.5 inches. So it's about 1.5 inches of drop. That's not too bad, but it is also a fairly light camper. As we're driving around down the road, hitting speed bumps, maybe turning and making evasive maneuvers in the case of an emergency, we're gonna feel a lot more difference because that weight isn't as supported. So let's go ahead, install our Sumo Springs, and see if that measurement changes later. And with the Sumo Springs installed, I can lower the trailer down, back onto the truck, and we can see how the measurement from earlier changed. So I'll make sure that this is fully on the ball. And we can go back to the wheel well and measure the same place we did earlier. Now I will say, from my perspective back there, it didn't look like things dropped down as much. And coming back here to check on it, I can confirm that. Right now, that measurement from the ground to the top inside edge of the wheel well is 39 inches. So it is still 1 inch of drop compared to what we were with no load on the ball whatsoever. But that's gonna be pretty impressive, and that will translate to heavier loads even more, and it's going to translate in the drive quality. So now that we've seen how the Sumo Springs performed, what are the benefits to something like this? Now obviously you're looking at suspension enhancement because probably you've got a trailer hooked up, whether it be a trailer you always haul or you are hauling a variety of different trailers and find yourself in this situation a lot where you hook up, the back end of your truck goes down because you don't have the proper support back there, and then the front end goes up. That's going to do a number of things. It's going to reduce the contact that our front tires make on the ground, reducing our stopping power and control. It's going to aim our headlights up at night, so we're not going to be driving down the road safely if we're driving at night. And just in general, it's going to decrease the quality of our ride. Now we can fix that though by adding in some suspension enhancement. And how these are going to differ, they install directly where your factory bump stops are removed and bolt right in. The big difference here is going to be the size, where the bump stop is really meant to just be a barrier, keeping the frame and the axle from banging against each other. This is going to be an actual support cushion. So this will make contact much quicker with the axle, and when it does make contact, it utilizes a progressive spring rate to push back. So the more pressure that's on these Sumo Springs, the harder they're gonna work to push back and bring you back closer to that normal factory ride height. Now, right out of the box, when you first have them installed with no weight on them, they're not meant to be making contact. So you're not gonna feel them driving around with no load in the bed. But as soon as we load up the back or we hook up to a camper or a trailer, that's when we're gonna start feeling support because they start to make contact, and as we go over bumps, they start to compress and push our truck back to its natural ride height. And because you get these in a pair and they operate completely independently from one another, you're also gonna get side-to-side support. So when we're going down the road and maybe down the highway, we get hit with a gust of wind and we feel that body roll in our truck, we're going to get support. So when it rolls to one side, that one spring will compress and push back and bring our truck back to its normal state. And when it comes to your F-150, you've got options. The Sumo Springs and Timberins are going to be a really great option for a maintenance-free solution. These ones aren't making contact unless there's weight on the truck, and again, maintenance-free, so you don't have to worry about them. Once they're installed, you just set it and forget it. They're also really great for a fixed tension. So if you have just a single camper that you're always towing, then you know you can rely on the same exact tongue weight every time. And if you get a Sumo Spring that works for that tongue weight, then you don't ever have to think about it. When you hook up, you've got the support you need. Now, where you might find that you need something else is if you're constantly carrying a different load, whether that be different trailers all the time, or maybe you have a utility trailer that's getting loaded up with different things all the time. That's going to vary the tongue weight on your truck and change what kind of support you need. In those cases, I would recommend airbags. Airbags are a great solution to have an adjustable option. The installation process is a little more involved, but you can make on-the-fly adjustments so long as you have some sort of air compressor on hand. And they become a much easier option if you get an onboard compressor, because that compressor is just there when you need it all the time. Now, these particular Sumo Springs have a support capacity of 1,500 pounds. Now, that's not gonna change the weight capacity of your vehicle. That's just what these Sumo Springs themselves can handle. So do keep that in mind when you're checking these out, that you find the right one for the load that you're gonna be carrying. If you decide that the Sumo Springs are the right option for you though, you do have options within that category. They make these in different densities. So the blue one is going to be your lightest density, whereas the black one is a slightly higher density, which means it provides a little bit more support. Now, depending on the trailer and the load that you're expecting, you might go for the less aggressive option or the more aggressive option. That's just down to you, but the installation process is going to be the exact same. The height of these and the bracketry is all the exact same as well, and they install the same way with the factory holes of your old bump stops. Speaking of that installation process though, let's walk you through that right now. Now, to start off the installation, you want to jack your truck up, giving the axle room to hang freely. Now, when you do this, you want to take the proper safety precautions. We've got our jack stand underneath the frame, we've got the front wheels chalked, and we've got the emergency brake on. And for the point to lift it up, we chose to jack it up by the hitch. That way the axle, again, can hang freely. You can remove the tire if you want, giving you a little bit more room to work. If you do that, just make sure that you reinstall it and torque everything down properly to make sure that it's all attached safely. But honestly, once we got it jacked up, I figured that we can show you the whole process just as easily because there's enough room to work back here. But we want to turn our attention to the factory bump stop, which we will be removing using a 13mm socket. You will need an extension for that just because it is kind of up in there and a regular long socket wasn't quite enough to reach. But just grab your ratchet and 13mm socket and head inside. We'll take our socket up into that bump stop there, get it to line up with the hardware that's in place, and start to get it loosened up. Now, depending on the age and the condition of your truck, this might be easier for some than others. Ours is a little bit firm in there, but just do your best to get that hardware out and remove that bump stop. And once that bolt is fully removed, we can just take this down from the frame rail and set it to the side. The Sumo Spring comes with new brackets. Each of them are going to be in two pieces. So the first piece is what attaches to the frame rail in place of that factory bump stop. And this is what it's going to look like. We're going to have these two tabs that kind of curve on the outside and point up, two holes on the top, and then these three sets of holes on this side. We'll get to those later. Right now, what we want to turn our attention to is these tabs with the curved fronts and the top two holes. This, like I said, is going to be the piece that actually attaches to the frame rail with these tabs facing towards the inside of the truck, pointing up. So this orientation for the driver's side. And we're going to be mounting these up in those pre-existing holes that we just removed the factory bump stop from, but we're going to use the frontmost hole on the new bracket, utilizing our new bolt that came in our kit to attach it and tightening it down with a 15mm socket. Your kit does come with blue Loctite. Add a drop to here before you do that. We're not leaving these installed, so we're gonna skip that step today. We've got our bracket with our bolt started in the proper hole. So I'm just gonna take that, put it up into place, and use the socket to actually help me reach that bolt head and start tightening it down into that hole that we removed the factory bump stop from. Once it catches, it'll be a lot easier to just kind of let it go, start tightening it down, make sure that these tabs stay where they're supposed to stay. That's gonna help us keep proper orientation front to back. And once you start to feel some resistance by hand, you can take your tool and finish the job. And once we've got that tightened down, we can repeat that process on the other side. Essentially, this will all be mirrored on the passenger side. Now we can get our Sumo Spring assembled. To attach our Sumo Spring to the other bracket, all we've got to do is line up the threaded hole on the top of the Sumo Spring to the open hole on the bottom of the bracket. Line those two up. Your kit will come with a smaller flange bolt. This one's silver, and you can just get that threaded in by hand until you're ready to tighten it down. Now, much like the other bolt, you will want to apply that provided Loctite before getting this on, but we're not using ours today because it's not a permanent install. Now, before we go underneath the vehicle to attach this bracket to the one on the vehicle, I do want to walk through the process of how that's going to look, because it's going to be easier to see things out here versus under there. So on the bracket here, there's going to be two holes. Much like the series of holes we saw on the vehicle side, these two will line up with one of those holes on the other bracket. Because there's 3 sets, that's going to determine your height setting. Now, to determine the height setting, you want to take a measurement before you jack the vehicle up between the mounting location and the axle. Ideally, you want there to be about 1/2 inch to 1 inch of space between the axle and the bottom of the Sumo Spring. That way, once some tongue weight is applied, you're actually making contact. You don't want this to be too high up and not be doing anything most of the time. Now, once you have determined that measurement to attach it, your kit's going to come with these 2 longer bolts. One side, the head there, will be held in by a 6mm Allen, and the other side will get a nut. But what we'll do, line the 2 brackets up, pass the bolts with a washer through both brackets, and then on the other side, it'll get another washer and that lock nut, which will be tightened down using a 13mm socket or wrench. And for the orientation here, the bracket is going to have an open side and a closed side. We want the open side towards the outside of the vehicle facing the tire. And of course, you're going to have a second bolt, much like the first one, in the other set of holes, kind of like this. Underneath the vehicle, we'll get these brackets lined up with each other, pass that first bolt through, and you'll see it pop out on the side closest to the camera here once I get that aligned. Just like that. Now it'll loosely hold itself in place. I'm going to actually get the other bolt started so it'll hang level. And then on the other side, it'll get that washer and lock nut, and then we can tighten everything down. And once you've got both sides installed, one final thing you might find yourself needing to do is actually go to the lines that are next to the driver's side Sumo Spring. They do come a little bit close. You might need to just zip tie those together just to give a little bit of extra clearance from the side of that Sumo Spring. Your application might be fine, but just a word of advice if you find that it's running a little bit close and maybe making a little bit of contact. But aside from that, that's it for the install. The process is really straightforward and only requires basic hand tools to get it all done. Your kit comes with everything you need otherwise, and the result is going to be a much better suspension.